Hey everybody, we're talking about how to make monogamy work better, tips for long-term success in monogamous relationships. I'm your host. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Dr. Diane Boyd, certified sexologist and double doctorate. This particular video is inspired by a recent video where I was talking about pros and cons of monogamy versus an open relationship. I was really talking about the importance of whatever relationship you choose, choosing what is right for you and your partner. Now, this particular video I had released generated quite a variety of responses in the comments of very, very differing viewpoints, which is awesome. And that is part of the reason and part of the motivation of creating this video today, because I love seeing all of the different types of viewpoints in the comments, because what that tells me is that people are in some ways understanding my biggest point here, which is that we get to choose in life what values we have, what is right for us. And just like there is no one perfect diet, no one perfect lifestyle choice that is right for everybody due to genetic differences as well as other things. The same thing is true about sex and our relationship, is that, hey, there's actually different ways we are wired. In fact, different things that are happening in our brains, such as the amount of vasopressin receptors. Vasopressin is one of the hormones that gets released with orgasm, with a little bit more in men, but also with women. And what we see is that vasopressin has a huge impact on pair bonding, on choosing one mate. And what we see in some studies is that the more responsive your brain is to vasopressin, the more likely you are wired for monogamy. So there might be this huge difference from one brain to another brain for individuals that are like, yeah, I more lean this way versus I more lean the other way. So my point here is that you get to choose, that you and your partner choose what is right for you. My work really focuses largely on couples that choose monogamy. That is my passion, is helping couples in long-term monogamous relationships make it better, find their passion again, fall in love again, all these things. So I'm going to go into some tips for how to really maximize and get the most out of your long-term relationship, how to bring that passion back. But before I do that, I want to dispel a few myths that oftentimes come up. So myth number one, and this is really important, is that monogamy, this is the myth, monogamy means you will not be attracted to others. So oftentimes I think we go into these types of relationships, into monogamous relationships, and there's no acknowledgement of the fact that, yes, we still as humans will be attracted to other humans. That is normal, that is natural, that pretty much will happen to everybody. One of the things that I think gets people into problems is when they pretend like this does not exist, that, oh, that cute person in the hall or that cute person on the office, like it's almost like this dismissal of it, versus actually acknowledging it and say, hey, this still happens in life because we're humans with sex drive, with attraction to other humans. And open discussions around what are our rules, what are our boundaries, what are our needs when this comes up, how are we going to take care of each other when this comes up, versus like pretending like it doesn't exist, can go a really long way. In fact, if you watch one of my most recent videos that came out on limerence, which is about this obsessive attraction that we have, this like crush on steroids that can happen with another human, one of the things I'd say in there, and I encourage you to go back and listen to that video, one of the things I say in there is, hey, if this happens, we can take that energy and instead of feeding it and fantasizing about another person, there's strategies we can use to put that energy back into our primary partnership, right? But in order to do some of this stuff, we need to acknowledge that this exists, that this attraction to other humans happens, and we need to talk openly to say, what are your needs when this happens? Do you have any needs? How are we going to do this in a way where when that happens, we are going to make our relationship stronger and it's not going to divert from our relationship? Myth number two is monogamy means monotony. And monogamy does not mean monotony. It happens oftentimes because we get into habits. We do the same thing over and over. We tend to have sex the same way. We tend to kiss the same way. We tend to be intimate the same way. We tend to have sex at the same time of day. Like everything has a tendency to become habits unless we take steps otherwise. But monogamy can become monotonous. And this can happen unless we do something else to avoid that, right? We do something else to stop that from happening. So when we see this happening, when we see that tendency, that drive of that habit to kick in, we want to take active steps to actually help keep it exciting, to help keep it novel, to help keep that desire really high. So now we're going to talk about 5 tips to help prevent the monotony of monogamy. Okay, first step, share fantasies, right? So share fantasies. So this doesn't have to be every single fantasy that you ever have, but we need to begin to share fantasies so we know what we're interested in. And some fantasies are meant to be fantasies, right? Some fantasies are very, very exciting and they can turn us on, but that doesn't mean we actually want to do them in real life. So some fantasies we do want to come true, but one of the first things to acknowledge about fantasies are, especially when it comes to sex fantasies, are there certain fantasies that can be hot in the brain, but the body can actually not want in real life. And so we want to start to differentiate those. Now, when we share fantasies, what is really important is to have some ground rules that you set up ahead of time before you go into the sharing mode. So what this means is there might be ground rules like, if you feel like this fantasy of mine is really weird, like I could ask my partner, like if you feel like a weird fantasy comes up and you're like, that is so weird, that is so out there, here's what I want you to say in response so I know you're not interested, but I don't feel shamed or judged. So we first, before we even start sharing our fantasies, we talk to our partner around like, hey, this is how I want you to respond if you think, this fantasy is not for you, if it seems weird to you, if you find judgment. This is how I want you to respond so I still feel safe and cared for. And so if we have a plan, if we have kind of these rules in the system going into that fantasy talk, then our partner knows how to respond to us if it's a no. And like maybe internally they're like, oh, this is so strange. I'm like, whoa, I don't even know what to think about this. They know how to respond in a way that can help take care of you so you still feel safe to share. And so it doesn't shut down that activity. Sometimes by sharing at these fantasies, sometimes one, this is such a turn on. 2, what is also interesting is some fantasies, once you share them out loud, they don't have that same sort of allure because sometimes fantasies are really just about like, hey, doing that thing that's like naughty or, rebellious or that sort of thing. And then when you name it and you're not shamed around it and it's, like, oh, okay, well, you have that fantasy. I love you, that kind of thing. Then sometimes we realize like, well, that is more of a fantasy just for my brain and not for real life. Other times fantasies are more interesting for people to want to act out. Okay, so that's step 1. Another tip is to do my yes, no, maybe checklist. So you can find my yes, no, maybe checklist at mysexdoc.com. So if you go to mysexdoc.com, what you'll find is a downloadable checklist that you can fill out with your partner. It's going to list, 150 different ideas, some from emotional intimacy, many from sexual intimacy. And the idea of this is to go through and get your yeses and be like, what do you have in common? Get your no's around like, hell no, in no way am I ever doing that. Take note of that. And then for the maybes that come up, then the way to discuss the maybes are, if one person is a yes to an idea, another person's a maybe, then the discussion can be, what could we do to make this safe enough for you to turn your yes or you to turn your maybe into a yes? Or what kind of things would be so unsafe and feel so bad about this maybe that would push it into the hell no category? Right? And again, when we have these conversations, setting the ground rules up. How do we want to respond? How do we want to have these conversations? And allowing some level of grace and forgiveness as you're doing this. So tip number 3 is turn towards each other. So this is something I learned in studying some of the Gottman's materials. I love the Gottmans. They're amazing relationship coaches. And they talk about this concept of throwing out bids, right? So we throw out bids for our partners, like attention or love. And how many times, like if we turn away from each other, like, oh, they kind of reached out for their attention and I'm like, I don't have time for that. Or they reached out to share some sort of fantasy and I'm like, that's so weird. The more we turn towards each other in these moments when there's a bid and we respond, tends to be directly related to the health of how long people stay in their relationships and if they get divorced and if they stay together. So the goal here is to really come at any of these conversations around like this, any conversation in general, or sex or otherwise, really be aware of the partner bidding and saying, I need a hug. I need that kiss. I need to talk. I want to talk about sex. I want to talk about fantasy. The more we turn and we say, okay, I can be available. And of course, nobody's going to do it 100% of the time. We're all human. We're all busy. We all have our moments. But just bringing that awareness of like, oh, this is my partner reaching out for connection. And the more I come and say, I turn towards them and say, I'm available to you, the more that is our habit, usually the better monogamy works. Another thing, and so number 4 now is where we're on, is prioritizing intimacy. And I'm talking about physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy. So one idea, and this comes from Tantra's, like tantric idea I really love, is the idea of like soft penetration. So this works really well with erectile dysfunction, or just if like sex has not been hugely on the table, or if there's vaginal pain where the vagina can't expand very easily without being, or penetrated without a lot of pain, which I have solutions for. Join my libido club to learn more. But if any of that is happening, then soft penetration is where you start to be intimate and you actually insert penile into the vagina while the penis is soft. So you have to play with different positions. Usually it's just kind of putting like the head in, sitting, maneuvering it around a little bit, just, putting the next little bit of the, the shaft in. Obviously there's not a lot of movement that can happen. But once you get the penis inside with soft penetration, laying there in that intimate space and talking and sharing and breathing actually can do a lot for really bringing that intimacy together. And if there's any sort of sexual dysfunction happening where penetrative sex is hard, one thing that's nice about this is it kind of takes the pressure off and it allows for that connection to still happen, while of course we still want to be working on the fundamental imbalance as well. And then number 5 is 25 to 50% of conflicts never get resolved, leading to divorce. 25 to 50% of conflicts in long-term relationships. That is a lot. So one of the things we really need to work on is this concept of forgiveness. And this is something I have studied so much from so many different sources, even down to priests. Right? So I've studied this from a religious standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, from a psychological standpoint. And one of the things that I've really gotten to with forgiveness is not saying that another person's behavior is okay. Forgiveness is about processing the intensity, the anger, the sadness, all of that, processing all of that so that intense charge does not live in your body, so that we can actually come to the table and have a conversation about what happened, to set new rules, to set new boundaries, to come and have some restoration, to say, hey, XYZ happens in order to repair trust. This is what I need. In order to have more confidence in our relationship, this is what I need. And the idea of forgiveness is saying, okay, we work to release that emotional charge so that we can actually come to the table and have a discussion from a loving way to say, hey, I want to make this relationship work. This harm was done. Here's what I need to repair this and move forward. And so with that, one of the things that I think really gets in the way is when we get so upset, which is oftentimes the appropriate response, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that response, but sometimes what we do when we get angry or upset is we disengage, we avoid. People use drugs or alcohol or overwork or some other coping mechanism that is not allowing them to feel the feelings. And the more we can come into the senses and to like actually feel the anger and how uncomfortable it is in our body and actually feel it and feel where it lives and breathe into it and allow it to be there and say, this is actually normal, and not try to project it out, not try to do all these things, but just allow our body to feel it and move that energy through. One of the biggest things I see with emotions that leads people to problems is when we try to make the emotion change so fast versus actually feeling it in our body. And the more we actually can do that and say, okay, this is normal. I should be angry. I should be upset. I'm going to allow myself to feel this. But then the forgiveness is like, I'm going to actually not hold these emotions in my body. I'm going to allow my body to appropriately process them. It's not making whatever that other person did okay. But then once we process them, then we can say, okay, well, I am, you can answer the question like, do you want to be in the relationship still? The answer is yes. Then a lot of times the follow-up question is something like, what do I need? And this is not something that is always answered in a day. Sometimes there's more time to process this that's needed. But the question is oftentimes, what do I need from my partner? What do I need from our inner personal space to heal from this thing so that we can move on? Right? So what do I need for this person to actually regain the trust again? Like, what is needed? And then being able to talk to that partner about it to say like, yeah, this was not right how I was treated, but I love you. I'm interested in repairing this. And here's what I need for us to be able to move past this. And when we approach something like that way, we can oftentimes figure out, okay, here's what I need to repair the wound. We're not pushing it under the rug. We're not making our anger or our sadness wrong, but we're just saying, hey, if I am constantly in this state of anger, if I am not processing that thing and I'm just constantly in the state, this isn't just about the health of my relationship. It's about the health of my physical being. It's about the health of my well-being. It's about the relationship to others. And it's about the disease that can happen if we continue to carry these emotions and we don't process them in our body. Okay, so those are my 5 tips for you in this video. I have so many videos on all sorts of things around marriage and monogamy and long-term relationships and tips and strategies on this playlist. So another video coming up for you right now.